address all questions for George if you have them, and that helps us.
Yep. Because if it says all panelists, only those of us on screen can see it.
I don't see no bubble, but I see text messages or texts. Some texts that pop up in the top right hand corner of my desk.
Yep.
That's it.
Like that one right there. What does that say? Is it all panels? Hey, go see you. Okay.
We'll get kicked off here in 1 second, and just.
Do you want me to text Jim real quick?
Yeah. Would you like to text Jim, and then we'll get things going here. George has a long, wonderful story, so definitely want to get it kicked off here shortly.
I don't see him. It's okay. We're getting some time for everybody to get in. Yeah, we have people from all over the place. I see Phoebe in San Francisco. Annie's in Minneapolis. Got somebody from Florida.
Henry. Oh,
all right.
He had the big guys. I got the little ones.
All right. Well, while we're waiting for Jim, we can go ahead and get the webinar kicked off. We're live on YouTube, live now on Zoom. We got more people starting to fill in. Welcome everyone back to another edition of TM 101. Thank you for everyone who's been a part of this journey with us. We keep repeating this, but we never thought it would come this far. And we're so thankful for the community that's been built around TM 101. And it's been able to give us an opportunity to keep the conversation fluid and to give back to the community, give back to the touring community. If you've been keeping up with us, Thursdays are a day for us to take a step back and learn from the pioneers of our industry and the influencers that have made a deep impact in the music industry, music business, music space as a whole. Today, we are joined by the legend, Mr. George Porter Jr., live from New Orleans. It is an honor to have you come and be a part of TM 101. I know that we've been trying to get this worked out for some time, so we're glad that you are able to make the webinar with us today happen. And so to get things kicked off, George, bass player with the Meters, you have a couple different projects going on, the Running Partners, you have the trio going on at the Maple Leaf, and I know that those projects kind of get you around gigging a little bit as well. You've recorded with artists such as Robbie Robertson, Dr. John, Paul McCartney, and so forth. Would love to kind of get things started off in your early life. You had talked to us about your mom getting you your first instrument. It was a violin, I believe. And you talked a little bit about that and how you kind of found your way to your first bass, and it was just fate from there.
Oh yeah. Well, mom, the idea mom had was to keep her sons off the street and through her gospel, well, not gospel, because it was a Catholic church, so they weren't doing gospel music. They were not exactly what they were calling it, but the choir director, Gus Lopman, I remember his name, is he told her that you should give your children instruments, make them play something that'll keep them off the streets, and so my mom bought into it, and she bought us violins. Well, she didn't buy them. It was like a lease kind of thing at Worldlands Music, to get you to buy stuff. We would kind of lease things to you, bring them home, and try them out on your kid to see if it works. But mom bought our violins home. The violins was in the house probably a few hours before my dad got home. And when my dad got home from work, and me and my brother was in the back, and my dad, he probably blew a gasket. He said, "Get them so and so things out of here, or somebody's gonna die." So that ended my wonderful beginning to music for at least a year or so. When my grandmother bought me a classical guitar, and but the idea was that I had to study. I had to take lessons in order to for me to keep the guitar. And again, I believe that guitar was in that program where you get the guitar and you have the at least kind of purchase thing. And so yeah, I studied. I had no trouble with it. I mean, I thought playing a guitar was gonna be cool.
You had mentioned that that neither you or your brother could blow as instruments, that you have trouble with asthma, so that was kind of where you ended up with violins, correct? And then
that's kind of what we ended up. Yeah, neither one of us. Both of us had asthma. My brother Ralph had actually. We found out later that he had diphtheria, and that was even a little bit more debilitating for him. So, but I had definitely suffered with asthma for a few years after my brother didn't have any problems, and he was still cool, and I was still suffering with asthma.
So, as you got your guitar, you had mentioned that you started out playing country music, but that was just a beginning. That wasn't really what you were really into. That was kind of your footing, your foundations. But one day you would be exposed, and for our listeners, George is right around 8 years old, 8 to 10 years old around this time, and you'd be exposed to something that would change your direction. You saw a band that played something different, and you were really into that. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that influenced you and your move from that?
Well, it was a walk. It was Saturday morning, and I was on my way to my guitar lesson. And to be frank, the music that I was studying for the classical performers to play classical music, because the type of instrument I had, my teacher was under the impression that I wanted to be a classical musician. So he was teaching me the formula of playing classical guitar using all 5 fingers in the thumb, 4 fingers in the thumb. And so the songs he was teaching me were country, western, cowboy songs, because they were simpler to learn and to finger. But this particular Saturday morning on my way to lessons, I took a different route to the bus stop, and I heard some music. And when I turned that corner, I saw these 2 gentlemen. One was a younger one, and it happened to be a guy named Benjamin Francis. We called him Papi, and his grandfather. And his grandfather was playing, this fingering, this classical fingering, but he was playing, St. Louis blues and, those blues songs, And at that point, I said, whoa, that's the songs I want to be learning. I mean, I'm okay with Home on the Range, but I want to play St. Louis Moment, And, that was probably the beginning to whatever the ending was.
I guess at that time you probably didn't realize that was going to be that was a path, a turning point in your life, but that influence put you on the path that would lead to where you are today, believe it or not. If you say you didn't have that situation, maybe you would have found that down the road somewhere else in time, but that influenced you to shift gears and find your sound, find your footing. And
at a younger age, yeah, I believe if I went to the lessons that day, took the route that I always usually take, and stay on Perdita Street, catch the bus at Perdita and Galvez instead of Tulane and Galvez, I would have missed that corner. I would have missed those guys playing, and it may have been another 2 years or so before I found out about that kind of music. Yeah. And then I might have missed the meters. I might have missed all that. I might have been 2 years late on everything.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that, looking that far back in time. And so now that you've found your footing and we're moving along here, we're moving. Okay, so you're in your teens now. You've kind of found your sound. You've tightened up your playing. You're performing now. So you're playing at clubs and you're like gigging around New Orleans as just a bass player. You haven't. This is pre-meters. you're just kind of getting your foot out there. Can you tell us a little bit about gigging in New Orleans pre-meters and kind of what came together? Because you had talked about Art a little bit, how he came into the picture and was kind of putting you guys together. You were playing at the Dewdrop, the Nightcap, and a bunch of different clubs you had mentioned. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it was like there was a gentleman, but Pop P used to play in a band with a guy named Herbert Wing. And Herbert Wing lived around the corner from my house when once my mother and father separated, and we moved uptown and so into the Carrollton part of the city, not far from where I'm at now. And Herbert had gotten a call from RT needing a guitar player. RT meaning Art Neville. But Herbert was busy that night. He had a frat party he had to play that night, so he couldn't make the gig. But he told Art that, hey, I got this kid, man, George Porter. He's a wonderful guitar player. He can hold down the gig. Well, I was a rhythm guitar player, not a lead guitar player. So I mean, I knew all the songs, I knew the music, but when he got to the gig, a couple of songs into the thing, Art turns to me telling me to take a solo. And I told him, I said, no, I don't solo, bro. I'm sorry. And he, so every other song, so he tell me, come on, take a solo. I said, I don't solo, bro. I don't solo, man. So on the way taking me home, and he told me, he said, no, you're the worst guitar player I have. And so that was it. It was a couple of years later that maybe not a couple of years, because time kind of swing by real quick back then. It might have been a year or so later. Art had been out touring with his brother Aaron, and he came home and he decided he wanted to start his own solo band. And so this one particular night, I was playing with Urban Bannister and the All-Stars, and we was playing a club called the Cindy Club. It was up on Galvez and Washington Avenue. Well, on the corner, right across the street from there, was this Key Club. Well, they didn't have a key. They had a little sliding hole on the door. The guy look out the door and see if he recognized you. You got to come in.
Very speakeasy style. Just a slide door open right there.
Yeah. So Art Fats Domino was a frequent visitor over there, and he usually would come across the street by us, by Urban, and want to sit in, towards the end of our gig, and Fats would come sit in, and he'd want to play for an hour. So we would be there playing for a whole extra hour, with Fats, because you don't tell Fats Domino, no, you don't want to, hey, bro, you got to get off the piano. So this one particular night, Art came across the street with Fats, and at this point, I'm a bass player now, and he at the end of the Fats jam session, Art walked up to me and told me, say, now that's the instrument you need to be playing, and he said, you want a gig? And I said, well, it's like this: Urban Bannister, Art Neville. Urban Bannister, Art Neville. I love Urban Bannister, but I'm going to play with Art Neville. Yeah. It was like a no-brainer, man. Art Neville. I mean, he was famous. So I went to play. I gave Urban what it was called. Art said it was going to be 3 weeks before we got to start playing. So I gave Urban a 3-week notice, but then a 2-week notice. I gave him a 3-week notice, and then I moved on to playing with Art at the Nightcap club called the Nightcap on Louisiana and Carondelet.
So that had to be a really big moment. I mean, even from like a crew perspective or a tour manager perspective, we do fall into that situation where like you really are putting your chips down on an opportunity, and then something really big falls on your plate, and you really you got to go for it. You got to grab the wheel and kind of go for it. It was kind of like that moment for you. It was like a big, like, I got to take this gig kind of moment. And you, for our listeners, you had gotten your start with the guitar, really. So you would just now was getting your footing with the bass, but you were comfortable playing the bass, right? at this point?
Oh
from
yeah, by this time I have been playing bass. I've been playing bass all the time because as a classical guitarist, you learn how to play bass. So I was playing bass all the time. So it was a real easy thing to just not use all those other fingers and just use my thumb and first finger. So yeah, bass. It was an easy transition to being a bass player. And I call myself a frustrated guitar player.
Yeah. Before I hand things off over to Jim, I'd like to hear, there was a turning point. You had talked about playing the dewdrop. This was like a turning point for you. You got put to the test to play a song. Can you tell us a little bit about it and how that really kind of, you went home and you really practiced and tightened it up a little bit?
Well, as a 16-year-old, I was trying to hustle my way into the dewdrop and on a weekly and weekend basis, and Frank Panier, the owner of the club, whenever he was holding down the door between the restaurant and the nightclub part, he spot me, in there. Come on, youngster, get away from here. You ain't supposed to be in here. Get away, So this one night, I came by and he wasn't at the door. And I was a tall kid. I was tall. I had my James Brown hairdo, big hair, big process and stuff. Wore my dark sunglasses, and the doorman let me in. It was like I said, "Oh yeah." So I got in, and I'm sitting and standing up against the wall and listening to the band play, and They were playing instrumentals, and most of all the songs they were playing were pretty much 12-bar blueses, And so they had a bass guitar leaning up against the wall, but right next to the organ, and so I went up to the organ player and I said, "Hey man, can I play the bass here?" And he said, "You want to play bass, youngster?" I said, "Yeah, I'd like to play some bass, man." And he said, "All right, cool." Told me to come on up and get up on the stage and play the bass. It was already plugged in and everything. And he looked over at the guys in the band, and they all had that kind of look on their face. And he called the song named "Tune Up," which "Tune Up" was not a 12-bar blues. I actually don't know what kind of blues it was, but it played one bar on every note of the configuration. So. All those were changes, and the tempo was like, and like I'm standing there, like I started playing a blues, and I'm noticing that this ain't right, And he Ching is looking at me and saying, "Come on, youngster, come on, catch up." And I'm lost, and and so embarrassed. He takes the bass from him, and he starts playing the song. So I get to hear exactly what the bass player, what's expected of a bass player for that song. And, I left the club that night with my tail between my legs and heartbroken to some degree, but had in my head, this song played in my head for months, and I went home that night, laid in the bed with my guitar, went to sleep with the guitar in the bed because I didn't have a bass at home. And, went to sleep with my guitar, and for the next couple of months, I learned and figured out the song because at that time I didn't have access to MP3 or go buy the album. I didn't even know who the song was by. In fact, I still don't know who the song is by. But I went back. About 2.5 months later, I went back to the club. I got this. I'm ready now. I'm gonna go play tune up with these guys, and I go back up and I said, "Mr. Ching, I think I'm ready, sir." He said, "You ready?" I said, "Yes, sir. I just am ready." Pulled me up on the stage, and they called the 12-bar blues. So, I never got to play a song with those guys.
Such a great story.
Right. So George, now we're at the beginning of we're at the late 60s, early 70s, and you've been kind of playing around with the guys in the meter. But how does that develop into the meters and the future band?
Well, I believe it's 66, something like that. I think it was late 65, 66 is when Art recruited me from Urban Bannister's band. And we played the nightcap for probably a year and a half. Then management at the nightcap changed over, and we moved from the nightcap to the French Quarters. We were off for about maybe 2 weeks or so, not playing. And then we got the gig at the Ivanhoe on Bourbon Street, and that was a 6-night-a-week gig. And we played. I think we played 4 to 5 sets a night, but it was an off and on thing with a gentleman named Jack Ziegler, solo piano player, and he used to call us Art Neville and the Boys. He had the song "Won't You Come Home, Bill Bailey," and he always play that at the end of his set, and he'll say, "Won't you come home, Art Neville? Won't you come home and bring your little boys with you?" So you know what I'm talking about. But that was 4 times a night he would do that for 6 nights a week, and so playing 6 nights a week, the band pretty much developed a consciousness of thinking to each other. And Alan Toussaint had been watching us off and on for probably a couple of years, because Alan used to come up to the nightcap and see us play, and then he would park his Eldorado out front on Bourbon Street. That's then cars to go down Bourbon Street, and he'd listen to the band from his car, and the doorman would always tell us, "Hey, yeah, man, your boy Toussaint was out there listening to y'all." Then one day we got a call. Art came to the I think we was at the club doing a rehearsal, and Art told us that Marshall had called him and said that Alan wanted us to come down to the studio to do an audition, and we went down and did this audition to play some songs with Alan, and eventually turned out to be Lee Dorsey tracks, and we got to be the house band for Seaside Studios, which within probably 6-8 months, led to us doing tracks on our own. After Lee Dorsey's session, Marshall told us, "Why don't y'all cut some songs? Why don't y'all cut a couple of songs or something?" And those first 4 songs we recorded was Sophisticated Sissies, Seahorse Farm, Here Come the Meter Man, and Sissy Strut.
And when was your
changed
first?
Our lives.
Yeah, and when was your first contract, and when did you figure out that you made it?
I never made it.
We made it in that situation. What was your first contract with Alan? We're all working on that. We're all working on making it.
Well, we released they released Sophisticated Sissy. I want to say it must. I'm a little unsure of that, because I think Wikipedia has it coming out in 68, I believe, which I thought it was done in 67. But I mean, absolutely, totally could be wrong. I did a lot of drugs back then. But Sophisticated Sissy did a big run up the charts, and at that point, Marshall, he thought he had something, so he called us all down to the office one day, and he had these 4 checks, and he had a check for each one of us, and he also had a contract about that thick, and said, "Hey man, these checks are for you. If y'all sign on the dotted line, and I think it was I think it was like a 6 or 7 year contract or something. I don't remember. It was a contract that was like stupid long, and but the check was $20,000. I had never seen check. I had never seen that many numbers on a piece of paper that would have my name on it before ever. So I took the check, and I believe I was one of the first ones to sign the check. Sign the contract, and I said, "I'm in," And that was the beginning. That's where it all started. By 1969, when Sissy Strut came out, and really made a lot of noise. You know, we were at that point still on Bourbon Street, but that's when we pretty much left Bourbon Street and went out and started hitting the Chitlin circuit.
And were you tour? What was the touring like back then? When you guys hit the road, what was that like?
Well, it was rough. I mean, but we were in a station wagon. Lee Dorsey had a body and fender shop right off of Galvin Street, and they had a old. It was like an ice cream trailer that Lee basically fixed that little trailer and made it a trailer that where we could put our gear in, and we hooked it to the back of the station wagon, and we drove this stuff across the road. I mean, basically, we were our own tech support. We, just the four of us in a Mercury station wagon, doing one night or so the road. Yeah, so it was. I mean, for the most part, it was exciting because I had never done it before. It was going to places that we played. Actually, this is a great story. I think it's a great story. Could be scary. We played at Pine Bluff, Arkansas. We played this club at Pine Bluff, Arkansas, and we pulled up in the early afternoon, like probably 5 o'clock, 4, 5 o'clock in the evening, and we're knocking on the side door to load in, and old black guy opened the side door and said, "Oh, you the guys come set up the music for the night, set the band up for the music," and Art said, "No, we are the band." And the old guy said, "Oh, Lordy." And we kind of looked at each other. So we walked into the building. The place had like mesh around the stage. It was like a Belushi thing, Like,
yeah, right out of Blues Brothers. Yeah,
back to Blues Brothers thing, man. That was the first. I said, "Whoa, what is this?" And basically, what happened is that we ended up playing Sissy Strut over and over all night. When we play other songs, the people was down to look at us like crazy. Nobody threw anything at us, but they was looking at us like really crazy. And then somebody was saying, "Play that song, Sissy Strut again." So we just play Sissy Strut again. Say, we got to get the hell out of here. Yeah, that was the scary part of our life. We had a few nights like that.
So bands today, or before the pandemic, make their primary income from touring, not so much album sales. But back then, you were promoting the records, right?
Yes.
Not necessarily touring to make money.
We would leave home with usually a couple of cases of albums in the back with the gear, because we basically how you say. We what we sold we got to keep, but the sales, I mean the actual CDs were charged against our future royalties, and so when after some point I don't know who actually did the math and came up with the sense, said, "Man, something, when we selling these deals with what they're charging us for, we losing money, so we at that point decided that." Now, y'all sell a CD, y'all sell a disc, the records. I keep saying disc, but y'all sell this stuff, and we'll just go out and play music, because we were losing money and trying to take the sales of the albums ourselves.
Yeah. So yesterday when we were talking, you talked about one of your first tours was a tour of Trinidad and Tobago, and with the first time you had a tour manager. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the adventures that was?
Well, we had a tour manager who was a superstar on his own right. Danny White had hit records out, and he wasn't a tour manager. I think Marshall sent him out there on the road to babysit the band who he thought that just was first time going out the country, and we just don't know how to manage ourselves, and it almost ended up in Danny White and Art Neville in a gun battle, because it just was not a good scene, as you know, as I mean, you know, Danny was he was an artist. He wasn't a tour manager, and he was put in a position to try and control for younger artists that you know, well, him and Art might have been probably in the same age period, but you know, but the Zig, Leo, and myself, you know, we wasn't handling that. Plus, we were hanging off the side of that building smoking pot. You know, it was. I mean, that was I love that hotel, man. It's a wonderful.
Yeah, like I said, I stayed there
wonderful.
almost a year ago. I know exactly. You walk into the lobby
Yeah.
on the first floor, and then all the rooms are down below it off the side of a cliff. Yeah.
Yeah, that was
I know it.
That was a beautiful hotel. I want to go back there.
So George, you told us that in the early days you were the head roadie and you did all the advance and all the setup. When did you decide to bring on an actual crew and just be a musician?
Well, there was a young man named Joe Francois. I met him one night. We were like off for a few weeks or something, and while I was off for those few things, like I said, with Herbert Wing's band back in the early '60s, I was like the technical guy. I was, you know, I moved the gear, I set it up, and I did all that. So, you know, so I knew about all of that. So Deacon Jones at this was needed at this point needed some help, and I was off, and he was paying. So I did some roadie work for him, loading up, help him set up his PA system in a club on Claiborne Avenue called the Desert Sands, I believe it was called, or the Desert Sands, I believe. And so, you know, I did that, and this one night I was loading out, and this kid named Joe Francois was like hanging out outside, and he was sort of like a runaway, you know, so I told him, I said, hey man, what are you doing? You know, are you hanging out and gonna steal something out the back of the truck or something? He said, no man, but I'll help you if you want, you know, I'll help you. So I said, sure. Why don't you help me and I'll give you something. And then at the end of that, I took him home and was dropping him off. And he lived up there, or he was living with his grandmother, but his grandmother had a rule. If you weren't in the house by a certain hour, I'm locking the door. You can't come in, you know, and don't knock. And so I dropped him off, and you know, I was suspicious about the whole thing. I just said, man, what's up with this kid? You know, and you know, it was funny because it was a house right up there on Claiborne Avenue, almost before you got to Jefferson Fair, almost before you got to the levee. So I took him in that loop and came back around, and he was laying on the steps, you know. So I said, hey man, come on, bro. And I took him home. Now this kid could have robbed and took my house and, you know, stole my daughter and everything. I didn't know, but he was a good kid, you know, and so I took him home as, you know, to help me, you know, and that's how that began.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you said he eventually became the sound guy at House of Blues, right?
He became the sound guy for the House of Blues. He worked all over the city, but you know, but he started off working with me, and eventually working for the Meters. I believe he did some work for Neville Brothers in the early years, you know, stuff. But we had so much fun with Joe because, you know, he learned how to set gear. I mean, he was the guy. He would sit in front of my little stereo system with an equalizer, and he would push the frequencies, each frequency up to hear what it does, you know, and he trained his ears to know how that worked and why this did this, you know. He was a loud engineer. He believed in mixing stuff loud. He believed it loud, but it was always clean, you know. And he was a wonderful little guy, man. He was a great engineer. I love Joe Francois.
That's great. So this was I think you said around 1974, and then as you guys kind of grew, you got other crew, yeah. And then you had a real tour manager at this point, I think.
Yeah, we had. Well, I'm still
more real.
Reserved on what Ruben Surkoff was a real tour manager. But we by the time we did the '75 tour with the Rolling Stones, Joe Francois. We had Curtis Slavin was now being a front of house engineer, and Joe was running the stage and doing monitors, and Rupert Surkoff was tour managing, and I say that very loosely, but there was always a trouble with tour managers and me because I always believed that I never put the hat on that I was a tour manager, and I don't even know if I want that job because to tour manage me would mean that you have to know way more than I do, and I rarely bump into guys that do that or have all of the instincts of what I personally I like to see happen. I know I've worked with some wonderful tour guys out there. I mean, there's guys that work with Governor Mule, the beautiful people, the great thing. Sandusky Trucks people are killer. I mean, it's almost like you don't have to want for anything. It's like before you think about it, there it is. And so there's tour managers out there that would be great, but they work with those people, and those people don't ask for certain things. But me personally, I've always just had trouble, and then my biggest troubles with my tour managers, as per se, is that they all sign on as, oh man, we just smoke a little pot, and then they mix it with other mostly alcohol, and then that's a bad combination, Yeah. And being a sober person, I just want more. I require more.
I was gonna ask you about that, but you kind of just answered it about having been, I know you were production manager for Jazz Fest, and you said done roadie stuff, and how that experience, helps you relate. But you just kind of answered that. And I've always said too that I would be the worst person to tour manage because I know what can be done, so it would be a challenge. But
I think it's a very I think that being a tour manager is a very what's that word, non-loving job.
Yeah, thankless.
Thankless job. Yeah. If you got home that night after a run of dates and you hadn't lost some weight and had not want to kill basically it's like you did good, because only the drummer pissed you off.
I wanted to mention too that something I thought was really cool when we were speaking yesterday was that you mentioned that you had a female drum tech back then, which you don't see too many women drum techs now, so I think that's
and on that 1975 Rolling Stones tour, there was a female drum tech with us. I mean, she was killing. She knew the job, and she did it really well.
That's so cool.
That's super cool.
Yeah, you don't really hear. Have you had many women working with you throughout the years?
No, I was against the law. My wife wasn't.
Oh God, I'm gonna let Mark pick it up and take us back into the timeline of your
little
story.
Going a little more in depth on your touring. Let's in the late 1970s and looking at your influences. I know that when we were talking yesterday, there was a lot of bands that going on tour. Like you had George Clinton and the Parliament Funkadelic, you had Sly and the Family Stone that was touring around that time. You had bands like Earth, Wind and Fire. Can you tell us a little bit about your influence around that? And y'all were going into this as an instrumental band, and then you were starting to feel the influences of wanting to be like kind of like a rock star band, kind of be more on that speed. But I think there were some differences, and I have some other things I wanted to touch on, but let's start there with just kind of where it was with
by the late 70s, we were no longer an instrumental band. We're actually 1971 when we recorded the Cabbage Alley album. Might be late 70s. That was pretty much considered our very first vocal record, where Art Neville and actually Cyril Neville was actually brought in and who performed a couple of songs, duets with Art. And I believe Zig actually sang the song on that record as well. We had moved into it was the worst of '69 and the '70s, early '70s for the primary songwriters in this band, Zig and Leo, being primary songwriters. Art Neville did do some writing. I did very little to none. The primary songwriters were seeing bands that opened for us, now have chart records and stuff because they were singing groups, they were vocal groups. And we had a guy named Art Neville in the band that management wouldn't let sing, and the guys in the Leo more than anybody was pushing and beating the hammer to get Art Neville to sing. The only problem was that the music that Leo was writing didn't fit Art as well as wasn't like a comfortable fit for Art because Art was not that kind of a singer. Art was a doo-wop singer. He was from that doo-wop era, and that's the kind of stuff he liked. And he liked George Jones. So it was a problem to some of the stuff that Leo was writing with these beautiful R&B things that just didn't fit Art really well. So that's when the idea of having Cyril do some singing as well as Zig, But at that point, we were changing from being a serious rhythm section that was like the rhythm in the pocket was the song necessarily than the words on top of it. We eventually got there, and I believe by the time we got to the Rejuvenation record, Art was singing more like what Leo was wanting him to sing, and Zig had opened up and really became more of a front singer as well.
So as the band's kind of behind the scenes working out the structuring of your studio albums and singing and going from more of an instrumental to more vocal, y'all are still touring. You had mentioned that some of the bands thought of y'all as like giant killers, like y'all came in and y'all would be mixed in between, and on the billing you'd have X amount of artists playing before you or after you, and you guys would come in and just rock the house away, and bands didn't want to play before you guys. Can you tell us a little bit about how the touring's still going on right now and you guys are just going from house to house? And you had mentioned the Apollo Theater as well.
Yeah, well, that was when we first noticed that that what we were doing was different from the everybody else that was on the bill with us at the Apollo. I mean, everybody on the bill at the Apollo at that point was vocal groups. I kind of remember the Five Steps being there. I can't remember. I think the Isley Brothers might have been on that one too. But all of the vocal groups, and then right in the middle of all the vocal groups, they put us with a pocket of like Look a Pie Pie and Sister Strut and stuff that was syncopated funky stuff, and it was like people the Apollo Theater, people were more kind of like we didn't like knock the Apollo down, but the artists, the people that the other bands on the show was like, holy man, what is this? I don't know, bro. I don't know if we should deal with these guys. I mean, we had instances with the Isley Brothers in Philadelphia where, man, the people booed them off the stage and was asking for the meters to come back on the stage. And it was like, say, whoa, And Pop Staple told us that after opening, after we opened for them 2 nights at the Bottom Line in New York. We opened the first night and Pop and them came on, and it was like the house kind of emptied out on them. And I thought that was kind of like weird, man. But they were more laid back, and so they lost half the house. So the next night, Pop said, "We're gonna open. Y'all play late, so let people empty out on y'all." Because basically the bottom line was a jazz room anyway. I think that maybe they were trying something new. We weren't jazz. Neither one of us, the actual jazz. I think that people that came there might have been jazz aficionados, and they was looking for jazz, and they just walked out on the staple singers like, y'all nuts, That's what my feelings was. But Pop told us that, and when he came upstairs that second night, Pops came over and passed our dress room and told us, and said, "You boys ain't never opening for us again." It was like, oh, Pop, we like your girls, man.
You had mentioned it a couple times while we've been speaking so far. You talked briefly on the Rolling Stones. Can you tell us a little bit about that tour and how that came about? You had mentioned Ron Wood. I believe it's seen you guys play and kind of opened that door for you guys, and y'all started touring in Europe with the Rolling Stones.
Well, all of those guys have seen us. We did I want to say 1969, maybe 68. Might have been 69 though. Might have been 69. We did we played, is it Prince Albert or Royal Albert something?
Royal Albert Hall. Yeah.
Royal Albert Hall. And it was a New Orleans show. And it was us, Dr. John, who else was there? Snooks Eaglin, and I want to say maybe Earl King. And we did this show, and after the show was over with, the buyers had told whoever our road touring manager at that point, I don't even have a clue who that was, that the British invaders wanted to meet us. So it was a meet and greet with us and with everybody from the Rolling Stones to Paul McCartney, Paul and Linda, Faces. At that time, Ron Woods was in that band, and that's it. Ron Woods and Rod Stewart in that band too, wasn't he?
Yeah, Rod Stewart was the singer for the band.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So it was Faces, and then a band called Poco Stick or something.
Procol Harum, maybe? No.
Was there a British band?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right, Mary Jo. I think it was Procol Harum.
Procol Harum?
Yeah. It was about six groups, and they all kind of marched them guys in one at a time. And the Stones came like at the end, because supposedly we were told that McCartney just didn't want the Stones around him. I don't know how true that was, but anyway, the Stones came in, and it was Keith. Because it wasn't, I don't think it was between the guitar players, Mick Taylor guys, and the other guitar player. But it was just Keith, Charlie, and Jagger, and we met those guys, and Keith was really excited about meeting the guys, and Charlie loved him some Zigaboo. He loved Charlie pulled Zigaboo on the side, and they talked for a long time. Yeah. So when it came to round 75, and they announced that they were going to do the 75 tour, U.S. tour, Ron Woods was now the new guitar player in the band, and Ronnie had Keith's ear, and he said, "Man, we can't do these dates in the U.S. without, especially the southern parts of the U.S. without using the Beatles on those shows, man. We just should not, so I guess that was well enough for Ronnie and Keith, and was good enough for Keith for Mick, and we got the call. We did we did 13 shows on that tour. The first set we started the tour in Baton Rouge, and we did I think we went all the way out to, we played the Cow Palace, I think it was, in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had done y'all had done a handful of those North American dates, but you had mentioned that Europe, y'all were even bigger in Europe. That y'all were, in your words, they were you were musicians.
Yes. Well, I thought that was the same thing in the U.S. as well. But yeah, when we got invited to do the European tour, it was only because we had done so well. The write-ups in some of the newspapers and some of the cities that we were playing, people were saying, finally the Rolling Stones got a band that'll bring them, that make them come out and work, and that kind of stuff. So, I guess Jagger wasn't scared of that. So he said, well, I'll bring them to Europe and see how they make out over there. So on the European tour, they had other opening bands, but we were always the band that played directly before the Stones. So we did that tour was like 93 days, I believe. 70 somewhat dates.
Yeah.
Mary Jo, I didn't hear that. You were cut off.
That was wow. That's a lot of dates.
Yeah.
That's not like, we'll do a 3-week leg and then have a break. That's a lot of dates.
And you had
that tour almost killed me.
You had mentioned that your touring crew had taken a little bit of break as well. That their TM kind of took control of a lot of the movements around that and kind of had built your team together, or pulled team, correct? Like some of your teams in North America.
Some of the earlier the team from 75 was dismissed for the most part. Only 2 of the guys from the 75 tour made. The girl was chopped. She lost the gig. We only took Joe Francois, our monitor engineer, and Curtis Slavin, the front of house engineer. And at that point, the Rupert Surkoff, tour manager per se, fired an extra tech person to bring on a bodyguard, John Stanley. And so it was, so that kind of thing. But from what I'm understanding, the Stones people pretty much, our guys barely did nothing. Once we set our stage, the first time we set up our stage, the Stones people they mapped out the whole thing, the stage and everything, and how it was going to go. And then their people put our stuff in and put our stuff out. And all our guys had to do was make sure everything got into the because it was all traveling in the Stones gear, and it was traveling with so our stuff would go in the trailer first, come out last.
It sounds like their team took care of you guys really well, and we've talked about that on several webinars. The relationships between acts that are going as direct support with bigger acts, and their communication with their TMs around that. It sounds like you guys were taken care of pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have very high respect for the tour managers working out there. Once I mean, I've just been unfortunate enough not to be able to have that A guy that was in my neighborhood, all the time. Even when he started out being an A guy, he quickly moved to a C.
Before we make our way into the 80s, the Meters would officially kind of call the quits. You had talked about there were some contracts on the table, and there were some differences between you and the band, and y'all's direction kind of tail ending in the late 70s, towards the end of 1979. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and kind of what happened with the Meters, and what was the kind of final decision around that?
Well, I think that the end result was that tour manager Rupert Surkoff has now decided he wanted to be the manager, which was he was going to be a puppet manager because Marshall Steelhorn was still running the show. But according to federal law, that managers can't be producers, because it's a conflict of interest. And so Marshall assigned Rupert Surkoff he built a contract for Rupert to give us to sign to Rupert, and that Rupert would be our manager, and he would, and Marshall would not be in that position of being in that conflict of interest business, because there was backdoor stuff going on that the manager was supposed to be jumping all over the producer about, but because they were the same person, the producer wasn't getting jumped on, and so the paperwork that was being handled and how our meter business was being taken care of was being backdoored, and so we were on the losing end. It took almost 20 years for us to get that settled. And even to not even get it to where we got our stuff back, but where we just got it out of his hands and put it in the hands of a better production company. Rupert presented a contract to the band while we were out in California recording the New Directions record, and everybody, Art Neville was probably closer to Rupert than anybody. So he knew about what was coming down, but he hadn't informed the rest of us on it. By the time we found out about it, it was definitely like when nobody was interested in signing this contract. Art had already signed the contract, and he was already put in the position of that, right, if they don't sign the contract, you ought to just quit the band and go start the band with your brothers, because Art has always wanted to play with his brothers. That's the dream that he's always had in his whole life, to have a band with his brothers in it. In fact, he wanted the band with his brothers in it to be the Meters, and but it was just that as a band, the Meters was, we were a unique rhythm section that was more as much music as it was singing. But if we would have taken out and becoming the backup band for the Neville Brothers, we'd have been just that, the backup band for the Neville Brothers. And that didn't sit well with the primary songwriters of the band. So that, and for me, some of the primary songwriters and me were bumping heads anyway, because we weren't playing enough of those gut bucket pocket instrumental songs that they were being used to play. So that kind of broke the whole thing. Kind of broke down. Art quit the band coming home from LA to San Francisco. Yeah, we were in San Francisco, and we I stayed with Zig and Leo for probably maybe another 2 or 3 months, and then I left the band, and I just left the band and just went to start getting high. I dug so deep into my drug abuse that it was like unbelievable. My wife says, "I will kill you." I just said, "It's just what you're doing is stupid," because she said that she blamed, because I blamed myself for this all happening, because I didn't fight for the band. I was protecting my high all the time. I just wanted my high to be safe. And I didn't want to, so I didn't argue for things. I didn't say, "Man, what y'all doing is wrong." If you look at it, this picture, I wasn't that voice of reason like I thought that I could have been. And I let everybody down because I took myself out of the mix.
So George, now we're looking at the 80s, right after the Meters had broken up, and then you were dealing with what sounds like drug and alcohol issues. Is that what you're dealing with in the 80s?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. All the way until 1988 when I got sober.
And how important was it when you started touring again to have sober crew and a sober support system on the road with you?
Well, it wasn't as important to have. I wanted that, but like I said, I mean, I didn't find that. I didn't find that. The good guys, the guys who really knew what they were doing, always getting high. And so I had to settle for for maybe not having the. I kind of insisted I didn't want the cocaine thing. The cocaine thing and the heroin thing, that was out. But if you smoked a little pot, you drink liquor, I was okay with that. The guys in my band, you know, the members of the band got high. You know, I just didn't get high. So, you know, it was that. So that was just, I was in an industry that getting high was a part of the industry. And at this point it was still very socially accepted.
So do you think there's a place for sober tour management and crew on the road?
Well, I believe it is. But I mean, you know, I put it this, the question, is there a place for a sober bass player in the music industry? I said yes. You know, so I think there's more than enough place for a sober tour manager and or production crew. You know, I don't believe that you got to be high to do the work that you do. I mean, you know, sometimes you got to think about, you know, maybe want to drink a Red Bull just because, you know, somebody in the band is driving you nuts, you know. But I think that, you know, I think there's room for sobriety in this business. I think it's big room, you know, and I appreciate, you know, I appreciate when I see. Denise brought it to my attention yesterday because I said that I didn't know any sober tour managers and stuff, and she brought to my attention that, you know, I know quite a few that I just didn't think about it.
So George, in the 90s, what were you working on?
In the 90s, I was pretty much, I was doing a lot of writing. I had, like you can see behind me, I have a studio, a home studio. I've had a home studio from probably 1985, 86. I've always had a home studio. So I've recorded since probably 1990. I think I have 7 records, 7 recordings. They're mostly all done in this room. Well, I've been in this house almost 20 years, yeah. So mostly done here, yeah. Go on my left side, I got this Tascam D88s. You remember those guys?
Oh yeah.
I got a whole rack of those things.
Do you still use them?
No, I don't. And those things got some really great preamps in them too. You know, I just have to figure out if I'm going to integrate them into thing. But I've been using Pro Tools, you know, and I just upgraded to a PreSonus mixing desk, which right now isn't talking to Pro Tools very nicely. They don't want to get along.
So in the 90s, you collaborated with people like Tori Amos and David Byrne, and you collaborated with many other artists over the years. What is it about certain artists that attracts you to working with them?
Well, they call me. The wonderful thing about getting sober is that the phone started ringing again, and my thing is, when people call me, when the Tories and the David Byrnes, like when David Byrne called me, and they sent me the music, you know, I said to myself, I say, they got bass players in New York City that play this, you know, every day. I mean, I don't even know how to pronounce the word merengue, you know. I say, what is a merengue, you know? But you know, it was like I did my homework and I went to the session. And it went. I did really good. And I remember asking the producer of the session. I asked him. I said, man, why did David call me to play this music? Because, you know, I mean, they got so many guys up here that does this for a living. You know, play this style music. And the guy said it had to do with the mambo feeling of the New Orleans music, you know, that music, the New Orleans pocket of that street music that's so influenced, you know, has so much pieces of parts of merengue feel, you know, this you know. It's that Caribbean influence to New Orleans. and that's what he wanted. And I said, well, you got it. And what I do really well is that when I'm called to play your music, I come and play your music. I leave my ego at the front door, and I come to play and be the part of what you need for me to be. And that's what I do really, really well.
So George, what were you doing in the 2000s and up to the present? What have you been up to?
This. Say my former guitar player Brett Anderson left Running Partners about 4 years ago. My wife of almost 51 years passed away November of 2017, and that could have easily been the thing that set me in a tailspin and put me back in my bad days. But I submerged myself into the music and started recording up here in the studio and writing with Running Partners. And then when Brent left the band, I kind of like, I said, well, we kept playing as a trio and we kept doing the trio stuff. And I kind of left all of them songs that I had done with the Running Partners. It was like 29 songs we had recorded. So we had 29 basically completed tracks, rhythm tracks. But I just walked away from them because A, I wasn't crazy about the guitar parts, and B was because at this point I didn't have a guitar player. But then so we started dealing with the trio. We started recording with the trio. We recorded 26 songs with the trio, and then COVID came, and with COVID came, I started revisiting those. Right now, COVID came, and I have a guitar player named Chris Atkins that I love, and I say, someone I say, we need to pull up these 29 songs, these 29 tracks, and let's get Chris to start playing on some of them. So that's what we did. We recorded. They're in the mastering process right now. The 12 songs are Running Partners. I'm getting ready to take off a week or two maybe, and then I'm gonna start revisiting some of those live recordings of the Porter Trio from the Maple Leaf, and start pulling those new songs that we played live at the Maple Leaf and possibly make a live record from that project. But it's pretty much the 90s, to 2000s, especially from 2000. But my wife came down sick around 2000, end of 2014. So for 2.5 years, I pretty much watched her melt away. So I pretty much stayed close to home, and pretty much didn't do nothing and just kind of stayed close to home, and spend her last days with her. I didn't want to leave, and here's what happened with me, and it was like really crazy. But I used to go down to Florida to Boca Raton, played a little club, the Funky Biscuit, and twice while at that Funky Biscuit, a close family member passed away while I was out on the gig. My brother was the first one, and then a year later, my mother. So when he called me to come down and play again, and in 2016 and 17, I told him, I said, I'm not leaving and come down there, because every time I come down there, somebody dies. So I just kind of wrote that room off, because I knew my wife was sick and I didn't want to leave her and come home and she'd not be here. So I stayed home.
So you told us yesterday that the pandemic has shown you that creative energies are still flowing. What has been flowing for you? What have you been up to during this time?
Well, it's just learning technology. Learning some technology. This, like I said, trying to get this beside his desk to talk to the Pro Tools is a learning curve in itself that I ain't doing too good at. I'm failing this test, but the fact that you know, we learned how to we did this whole running for this record in the cloud. I laid down a bass track with not even with a click track, just a bass, just play it, and I put it up in a cloud session, on Pro Tools cloud session, and invite Mike Livner, my keyboard player. At that point, he chops up this bass line, puts it in sync in time with with the track. So he grids it. So now I have a roadmap. And then he sends it back to me, and I record. I record my whole parts. And I'll make it. I'll address it, chop it up, make it a song. And then he puts his keyboard parts on, and then we invite Chris, the guitarist. Chris puts his parts on, and then after we got all our parts and the vocals and stuff like that, if there will be vocals, if there's most of them are instrumental, then we send a two-track mix of that to the drummer, who goes to another studio because he doesn't have a home studio. Chris and Mike has home studios. He goes to another studio and he puts down his drum tracks to our existence. So he basically plays to a recorded track. He's not. So he kind of gets to hear all our hits and play around our hits and stuff. So we just was learning the technology, learning a way to deal with the hand that we've been dealt at this point. And it doesn't look like this is going to be going away anytime soon. We may be up here doing this for another year.
So, George, when you were starting out, did you have any mentors? And even today, do you still have any mentors?
Coming up as a kid, my mentors were all local new musicians. I mean, of course, I loved Ray Charles and I loved Curtis Mayfield. But it was the Earl Kings. Fats Dominoes. Definitely, some Neville brothers, not Neville brothers, but Neville brother, Art more than Aaron. There was Eddie Bull, and then there was the Lashley brothers, the two guys who I played on the street with, with David Lashley and Walter Lashley and his sister Betty Ann. And then there was another family band called it was the Johnson brothers, I believe. And they was sort of just like the Lashley brothers. It was a saxophone player and a drummer. And very timely, they had that band consist of had Irvin Charles and young Irvin Charles on bass, and Irvin's dad playing guitar. But when Irvin Charles couldn't play, I would play gigs with the elder Irvin Irvin Charles and those two brothers. My mentors were local. Alan Toussaint, Dave Bartholomew, those guys. That was music for me. That was what my music was. I mean, I listened to other music, because we, like I said, when the band that became the Meters started out playing together, we were playing cover music. We were playing songs that weren't just New Orleans music at that point. Before, when I was playing with Irvin Bannister's band, or when I was playing with Herbert Wing's band, we played James Brown. He played James Brown, but most of the music that Herbert's band played was New Orleans music. That's when New Orleans bands were playing New Orleans music. You go up Bourbon Street today, and there's New Orleans bands down there, and they don't even know New Orleans music. It's unfortunate.
George, now that we're kind of tail ending, we like to ask a couple questions, and we have one question from Tyler, and I have a question myself that I'd like to hear a little bit more about. do you have any good Colonel Bruce stories?
Colonel and I just we kind of just usually while we're just sitting around talking about other people. so I'm not sure if it's good for to talk about. We would just always just have fun. He used to call me and my wife the king and queen of jam crews, and he was just, and he was, he said, "Here comes the king, here comes the king and the queen," and my wife would probably go run off and hang out and go by the pool or something, and me and the Colonel just be sitting around and talking about people passing us.
We have a question from Amanda Forbes. George, do you find that all the new recording production technology make things better, or do you prefer more original live methods of recording or doing shows?
Well, I think playing a show, there's going to be nothing. There's nothing going to change. What happens when guys are sitting in the same room, playing off of each other, rather than sitting in 4 different rooms, playing at each other. There's definitely a difference a way when you're actually playing off of each other. I'm gonna always love that, but I am not. When the world went digital, I wasn't a guy standing in the hallway hollering, "Where's the tape? Where's the tape?" That wasn't me. I was one of the guys that said, I better start learning this stuff, because it's getting ready to be the way of the world, and I'm not gonna be sitting back and be left out. I learned when we first started working when Marshall first brought us into doing the studio work, and I was introduced to Cosmo Matassa. I knew right then that what he was doing, I wanted to learn how to do. I wanted to learn how to take those 4 guys and put them on that little bitty tape. I wanted to learn that, and I did that.
Not only a pioneer, but an innovator as well, and just adapting with the times. And a lot of musicians didn't. So that had to be, now that you're looking back, was kind of like happy that you did that. You made that move to learn all the new technology and innovation that you had access to.
Yes. I believe that's a plus. That's a definite plus.
A couple more questions. Let me address this one properly. 1 second. Do you have an all-time favorite show or anything that really that changed your life in music?
Well, I do probably have a couple of all-time favorite shows. I believe the one night on the 76 tour in Europe, we were the opening night in France out of the 3 nights runs. And the band went out on stage, and the audience they were hostile from not even from the first note. They were just hostile. And then, we just didn't know exactly what to do. The guys, we just kind of put our stuff down and walked off the stage. And Jagger and Keith Richards, rounded us up and said, "Well, let's go back out and play." And they went back out on stage with us, and we were singing "Fire on the Bayou," and the band started playing, and they stayed out there with us for probably half the song, and the audience, well, Jagger basically told them, "Man, y'all need to shut up and listen to these guys, because y'all gonna like what we like," and they did. The next 2 nights were flawless. We went great. In fact, the rest of the European tour was pretty much on, because what happened in France, pretty much, word spread, that, these guys are more than just, cute.
And that had to be a really great feeling too. Not only to be there in Europe, be direct support to the Rolling Stones, but to have the full support of the band as well, to come out there and perform with you guys. And let their fans know that that you guys are what's up, and they need to pay attention.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there was one other good highlight I thought was always cool, that I got to actually play with them. I don't remember where we were, but usually when the Stones finished their set, they would exit the stage, and Bill would probably be the first guy off the stage because he was the closest to the left-hand side of the stage. He'd be up first, went out in his car, and boom, gone. Well, Eric Clapton jacked up Keith and Ronnie going off the stage and said, man, let's go play. I want to go play with y'all, man. Let's go out and play. So they all went back out on stage and played. There was no bass player. So I'm standing on the corner of the stage, and I'm looking at Keith and Ronnie, and Keith gave me the high side, so I grabbed Bill's bass, and I started playing and jamming on basically a blues. It was a blues song. I can't remember which it was, but it was a blues song. And Bill, they finally reached Bill and got him to come back. His limo came back. We were well into the song by Bill got back. And Bill come running out on stage, and he's running out on stage, and I'm playing his bass. So for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I was boycotted from the stage. I couldn't play. I couldn't come up on stage. I always thought that was a memorable story.
George, before we hear your final words, which been looking forward to, I know that we had kind of talked about that briefly yesterday. I would love to hear, I know that you had mentioned the running partners and some things going on. You had mentioned that y'all have been working on some tracks and been making the most of this time to get some of that music out that you've been sitting on for a minute now. Can you tell us how that's been going, and so has any of it been released yet? But you have some new music coming soon.
It's gonna we're gonna be releasing a single within the next couple of weeks, but all 12 songs, 12 of the 29 songs are finished, mixed, and are being mastered right now. We released one of the songs. The song is going to be released. The artwork is being done, or the title of the song is going to be called "Crying for Hope," and it was kind of it was one of those songs that kind of came to me in the midst of. It was like a last minute kind of feeling. We thought at song 9, I thought that we were done with the recordings, and then this song kind of hit me, and I got up one evening from a dream and came upstairs in the studio and wrote this bass line, and passed the track over to Mia Borders, who is a wonderful song lyricist and female artist here at home, and she's been writing lyrics for me, and also Miss Susan Kelso has been writing lyrics for me. So I've got a wonderful team of players around. Michael Limler is a keyboardist, and I call him my band leader and musical director. He says that's crap, but he's my band leader and musical director. Terrence Houston is the drummer, and Michael's been in the band for almost 30 years. He's been here for a while. Terrence has been in the band for about 10 years now. And Chris Atkins is the new kid on the block. So he's about 2.5 years. And he's bringing such great story on Chris. One day, we in the band talking, and I said, something, Chris, why don't you write the set list for the gig tonight? You write the set list. He said, you sure? I said, yeah, you write the set list. So he said, cool. So we just let him go. And, when we got to the sound check and stuff, Chris hands us a set list, the songs that he wanted to play, for the gig. And Mike looked at the set list and said, we don't know these tunes. He said, but it's all y'all music. He said, yeah, but I said, we ain't played these songs in 10 years. So I love Chris because Chris actually learned my whole catalog he knows he knows every one of those running party records, and he's always, I guess he always had a handle on some of that meter stuff, but he prioritized the running part of this music when he came to this band. And so it made me and Mike go learn some of our own music. It was good. I love it. So yes, to answer that question, there's new music for running artists. I'm not sure. We still haven't decided on if this is going to be an actual CD or physical something, or it's just going to be a total digital release, or we just going to take and put out a single every 2 weeks or something like that. I'm not sure. We haven't not heard. Management has not, come up with a what you call a program yet.
Well, regardless, we're going to keep an eye on it, and we're excited for the launch, and we'll definitely be following all your social media for an announced date. George, before we do our final wrap, we like to have like a final word from you, maybe from like, if you could leave anything for our listeners, maybe a word of wisdom from George, anything that kind of ties our whole webinar together today. Is there anything off the top of your head that you could leave for our students and listeners today?
Oh, you wonderful, wonderful people. Oh, you wonderful, wonderful musicians, touring musicians. Take 1 minute, look over at your tour manager and tell them, job well done.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much, George. Just to close, George, your story is just so moving and just amazing, and an honor to have you be a part of this. And I know our students loved it, and friends and family and everyone who's jumped in to watch our live stream today. Thank you for joining us, George. We hope you're staying safe. I'm right in the neighborhood. For anyone who would like to, that may have missed this episode, it will be live on our YouTube page to rewatch, and on our website as well. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll be back on Monday, same time. And everyone have a great weekend. And George, again, thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
You're right. Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful weekend. We'll see everyone soon.
All right. Stay safe, stay happy, and stay healthy.
Bye,
Thank
George.
you. You too. Same way.